Do the good teams get better and bad teams get worse?
What did you mean by that? Because that sounded very powerful. The good teams get better and
Bad teams get worse. Are there self-fulfilling cycles? If a team gets off to a good start, there's cohesion, there's gel. Does that mean that they're going to be more fruitful and perform better? Teams will get better over time. But, often what I see is that teams may have something that derails them.
Associate Professor Catherine Collins works as Chief Investigator for the Management Lab at ArcManu. She is also a member of the Quality Work in the Digital Age Network and an academic researcher into employee well-being and team effectiveness. Catherine is an associate professor at UNSW within the School of Management and Governance.
every leader like me want to know about this. We're all trying to get it right, and maybe at least 30% of the time we stuff it up miserably. Associate Professor Catherine, welcome to the Martian Logic Podcast. We've been talking online and via emails for a while, and we're really looking forward to have you on board to talk about a lot of the interesting stuff that you've been working on and are of great interest to us. Now, can you introduce yourself? You're an associate professor, where and what you've been doing, say, in the last 10, 15 years?
Yeah, sure, Anwar. Look, pleasure to be here. I'm very honoured to be invited. My role at the University of New South Wales as Associate Professor, I have been involved in a number of research centres and networks for some time.
Yep.
So at the moment, I'm involved in an Australian Research Council Industry Training Transformation Centre. So that's a very long way
Sure.
of saying we have an ecosystem of partner organisations that we work with. We're called ArcManu. We work with the architecture, engineering and construction sector, and we're looking at digital transformation. It's an interdisciplinary group with architects, we've got computer scientists, people from the management discipline such as myself. I'm in organisational behaviour.
Okay.
And also we've got a strategy professor, someone in institutional theory. So we're really looking at this problem of digital transformation from many angles. That's one of my research networks. Another one I'm involved in is QINDA, which is the Quality Work in the Digital Era. So we're a research network, not quite so formalised at the moment, and we're really looking at Industry 5.0 and really trying to sort of embed more humanistic approaches to technology in the workplace
Okay,
today.
let's get straight into that. Industry 5.0. What does that mean? Why 5, not 4 or 6 or 7? What's that 5.0?
Well, yeah, interesting question. I mean, Industry 5.0, we've gone through a number of industrial revolutions over time.
Fair enough.
And
What's the first one? The actual one in the 40s or whatever, 50s?
Oh, way back before then.
Ooh.
So we could go back to the 1800s. And that was really when we moved, a lot of our work from agriculture into factories.
Right.
And if we looked at collaboration and teamwork then, it's very different to, the second industrial revolution where it was more about efficiency and electricity. The third industrial revolution was about computers. The fourth was really about connectivity. And now we're at the fifth where, there's a lot of technology out there and people are feeling very disconnected. And there's ethical concerns, there's legal concerns. And really the fifth industrial revolution, the remit for us, as technologists, as people interested in organisational behaviour.
Is this 5.0 timed with the, particularly when you talk about technology, with the chat GPT invention, the AI stuff, or even before that? For how long have you been calling this 5.0? Is it something just happened in 2025?
It's just emerging now,
Okay.
yeah.
And is it because of that, the concern or the interest in creating, say, there's something happening right now, there's a point in time where it's going to be looked at in history and said there's something emerged now. Is it because of that? Because of the
It'd
AI
be one
emerging?
of the leading indicators. I mean, I think part of it too is also, a deep immersion into the electronic world through COVID, and that our connection was, essentially online unless we're essential
Okay.
services.
Okay, fair enough.
So
Yeah.
it's emerging for a number of reasons.
Okay.
And so that's a core interest in the
Okay,
research
so-
groups that I'm involved
So
in.
let's talk about that. Why there's a research about that? What are the concerns? What are the opportunities? Give it to us in a simple terms, the good and the bad and the ugly.
Yeah. Well, I think, if you start with the ugly, if we're always connected with technology, there's burnout, there's disconnection, social fragmentation in those sorts of humanistic terms.
Wow, we could talk for 3 hours just about this point.
It is, but we
Yeah.
might want to bring a sociologist into that conversation.
Okay,
Yeah, maybe
interesting.
a little bit out of my remit.
Okay.
And then, there's, of course, the legal concerns. We've seen that with, AI in terms of, intellectual property.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
And so I suppose that would be the downside. The upside of thinking about Industry 5.0 is that we can really take charge of this situation. I mean, we've been working with technology for decades now.
Yeah.
And, I think we really have a better appreciation of what it can do well and what it can't. And so there's a real opportunity there for businesses to make the efficiency gains, yet do it in a way that keeps us connected as a human race, really. And I suppose that's a really tall ask for those listeners in human resource management.
Well, do you, part of that research, not necessarily at all, I'm just wondering, do you talk about the risk of AI in particular? For example, falls in the wrong hands, the hackers, crime people, etc., using such a powerful tool in a sense so they can do what they do better, the bad things, in other words. Guys get into that or not necessarily?
Yeah, that definitely, that research does occur in the research networks I'm involved in. My core interest and passion is around collaboration. Originally, I was a researcher on teamwork. So a team is, a group of two or more people who collaborate, to pursue a goal. And collaboration is really defined in the same way. Yet, collaboration, given our workplaces today, we're not tightly knit, discrete, separate teams. We work in networks, we work in ecosystems. It's much more dispersed. And so that's where I really make the difference with
So that's your
collaboration. Yeah, so I focus very much more on the human
At the
side
moment,
of the
that's-
equation. That's my core research.
one of your interests and core research is collaboration. So I would love to talk about that. Tell us, I mean, clearly this word is very broadly used and, what's your research is?
Yeah. I suppose, a catchphrase that I often use is that do the good teams get better and bad teams get worse? And so what can we do as team members, as team
explain that,
leaders?
if you don't mind. Sorry, Catherine, because I'm having to think about it, and maybe other people are. So explain that, if you don't mind, before you go into any further. What did you mean by that? Because that sounded very powerful. The good teams get better and
Bad teams get worse? It's a
And
question that I
what do you mean by that?
ponder. So, are there self-fulfilling cycles? If a team gets off to a good start, there's cohesion, there's gel. In that type of situation, does that mean that they're going to be more fruitful and perform better? If we think back to some of the very early work at looking at high-performing teams, some of that very early works, people may be familiar with, how teams develop over time. There's a forming, storming, norming, performing sort of flow of how teams develop, and that was Tuckman back in the 1970s.
I'm not familiar with that, but it's fine if you don't want to drill into that. by any means, but just so you know, I'm personally not familiar with that. It sounded interesting.
And so there's, this idea often that, teams will get better over time with experience. You learn what works, what doesn't work. But, often what I see in organizations is that teams may have something that derails them. Maybe there's not a good start, with team cohesion to begin with.
Anybody with common sense would agree with that. I think for you to say, any team just with time is going to get better, I think it's a bit, too well.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you've got bad apples, you've got, in other words, you can really set a team to fail. If anything, but time is going to get worse and worse. I can see that without even doing any research into it. I totally seem to be logically agree with you. Certain foundations, they've got to set the team to succeed. In other words, as management, as leaders, got to be able to have some kind of skills about, getting the foundation right, but staying on top of it to see if there's any bad apples emerging and stem that straight away out. And no. Logically, I would think about it like that.
Yeah, definitely. That's great to hear that, it resonates with you that, teams can have multiple tracks, right? And, the way you were explaining that then, we can jump on a situation where there is a bad apple to begin with. So I suppose there you're sort of looking at, are people bringing a toxic personality to the team, or haven't they got maybe the right skills? It's a very individual focus.
Well,
and so some of my work has looked at that level. I'm very interested in particular about, when you've got a team sitting around the table, what processes, how do you have that conversation? How do you interact? We call those sort of team processes. What ones are most important? So that's, I suppose, at the team level, what people can do. And then there's things at the organisational level in terms of, how do you design teams in the first place? Do you put people in teams or expect everyone to collaborate?
Catherine, this is very interesting. I had no idea what we were going to talk about when you said collaboration, but this is very, very interesting. Would love to hear from you if you start with the design.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn? What can someone like me who is trying to create teams all the time, and we sometimes do okay, sometimes we fail miserably, which just happened 3 months ago. We realized a team that was really just completely failed, and we'll rebuild that. We are, as we speak, rebuilding that from scratch. So I came in late this morning. I worked till office here till almost midnight, rewriting the ads and stuff. On Seek, I'm rehiring this entire team. So that is really interesting. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, the design of teams. And I think when you were talking then, what jumped into my mind is how do we recruit a great team player. How do we then induct that team player? How do we set up work processes?
Yeah.
Wow. What do we ask them to do in their day-to-day job? And in some ways, structuring teams, I think, comes a little bit further down the design route. It's really sort of looking at what organizational structure. Do you want a flat structure? Do you want a tool structure that has multiple layers of managers or leaders? And I think that there are very different approaches of organizations that have happened over time.
Designing a team, Catherine, if you can educate me about that, we can carve out this content, whether it's going to be 30 minutes or 2 hours, and sell it. Every leader like me want to know about this. We're all trying to get it right, and maybe at least 30% of the time we stuff it up miserably. So this is so interesting, designing teams. So from recruitment, because, when I'm involved in recruitment, that means it's very strategic. I've got one of the best recruiters in the country helping me on the recruitment, but I'm involved because I want every word in the ad to be authentic, to be reflecting what we're looking for. I don't want ChatGPT ads on Seek. I want us to be really talk about who we are and what we're looking for, to get it right. people from the very beginning not to be misled and attracted to the wrong thing, you know?
Mm.
So this is one of the logics why I'm involved, but also as you're writing the ad, you're strategically designing and writing. It's like, in my mind, it's iterative. You're going through the entire process. As you're writing the ad, you're imagining this person, how they're going to get along, how with the team, the culture, the skills, all the issues that might have happened before, how what we don't want them to do or expect, etc. I'm doing all of that. And that's why, it took about 6 hours in total. I've changed it 1,000 times. And so is that a good start? Am I doing something right or wrong here? Or?
Yeah, look, that induction process is so key. They're experts on recruitment and selection out there. And so I think the principles about whether you're recruiting into a specific team or recruiting more broadly for your business, those principles of recruitment apply. Going back to an earlier point you had, Anwar, there about, what are sort of the characteristics of the team member that I need to obtain for them to be a good apple, right? And to help my business bloom. From, an organisational psychology perspective, many of us look at, personality traits, right? And, that is an important piece of information. And I suppose, when you're thinking about recruiting, there'll be questions in there about, the personality or the attributes a person's bringing to the team. And I looked at how personality plays out in teams during my PhD a couple of decades back now. And so I was particularly interested in some of my findings around conscientiousness, right? So conscientiousness is one of the biggest things that people could bring to a business that is positive, right?
Explain to us, please, what that is.
So conscientiousness is, when you've got attention to detail, you come in, you're ready to have energy to put into the team, that you are, you follow through on tasks. Being conscientious is, a personality trait that is important for all workplaces. And
in my, do you understand it? Is it attention to details? I'm sorry. To me, it sounded like you said a few things that not necessarily the same one point. Do you mind one more time, please explain to me what conscientiousness is?
Yeah. So conscientiousness is, something where you dig in to look at, the attention to detail in tasks, follow through on tasks.
Okay.
It can be, those very sort of micro processes in a job,
Interesting.
looking at a huge amount of detail. But conscientiousness too can be a broader attribute that a team that a team member brings to provide direction. So it could be a bigger picture as well in terms of helping give some vision.
Sounds like the total opposite. Attention to details and the big picture, the strategy, all in one?
Well, I think it's really about, following through on the tasks that you say you're going to do. Right.
Fair
And
enough.
so whether it manifests at a micro level or a more macro level will depend on other attributes of the person. And most of the research on conscientiousness is that it's a really positive trait. And I looked at teams, how they work together over a period of time, like over a whole year, and tracked how one really conscientious member in the team can impact the team processes. And so in my PhD research, I found that, having one highly conscientious team member in diverse group of people can be very helpful to begin with to help workload sharing. That's what you want in a team.
To begin with?
Yeah, to begin with.
Is there a but here?
There is a big but.
Whoa, okay.
Big but. But over time, people come to rely on that person and it becomes manifested and deeply ingrained in their role. And so other people take the foot off the accelerator.
Ooh.
And so workload sharing becomes particularly uneven if you're in a team that has one highly conscientious member that is much more conscientious than other people. And so conscientious, I think with personality, we can bring attributes that are positive in some situations and not in others. And I suppose that's why my research has shifted more from those individual attributes we bring to think more about, well, how do we work together over time? You know, what do we do in our collaboration? Do we look internal in our team? Do we look external to customers? And so that's why my research has really shifted away from looking at individual attributes.
More of the balance of the entire team.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
in a team of 5 people, do we need one person to be conscientious, have got high attributes in that area? So you're looking at the balance of the team. It's interesting. Can I just say that? And just for people that might be like myself, leaders, managers out there, I've always resisted this concept of, in my mind, I'm going to say it really as it is, analyzing people to that degree, psychometric, in other words, testing stuff. Always felt it's a bit wrong because it's really saying, are these people enough for us? And I have to apologize to using the word bad apple. I not necessarily meant it bad people. I really meant it, the wrong person in the wrong place. And sometimes not necessarily the bad apple, it's the actual person. Is maybe the company's doing something wrong. The process is wrong. Meaning seeing bad apple things developing, not necessarily a person's the bad apple. Bad things. So I definitely didn't mean it because again, I don't like to look at people like no one is bad or wrong. It's wrong for us or for this team in particular at this point in time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Fit might not be
and
right.
So I just wanted to explain that, and then to come back to that point, please. Clearly you're right. I know you're right, but I'm just saying I want to share that with you. And already started to see why you're right. I've just learned already a couple of things from you. So, Catherine, I appreciate that. But just felt it's wrong to analyze people like that because who's to say that we are such a perfect company, that we are going to bring these perfect people or something? It's about the balance, about understanding that team, understanding what the company wants, and then getting that balance of that person to complement. I don't know. But clearly, maybe it doesn't go long enough, and maybe that's when we need to learn the stuff that you're researching. Stuff. Just wanted to share that with you for better or worse.
Yeah. And look, I think if we think about recruitment and selection and knowing people in detail, in terms of that strand of human resource management and organisational psychology, it is really crucial, especially when the jobs are high stakes, to be doing our due diligence on people. What do they bring? And equally, then it becomes a conversation about it's a ongoing transaction. It becomes a relationship. What can I give to the organisation? What can I get back in terms of my learning and my career development? And so it is a really important part of human resource management, and especially when the socialization takes a long time to bring a new person into an organisation and train them up. That due diligence step is important. It's just something that I'm not focusing on research at this point in time.
Okay, so let us bring you back to where your passion is at the moment, where your research is focused on, which is that whole collaboration thing. How should we break it down? Should we break it down into maybe 3 things? We've got about an hour and a half maybe now to go.
Yeah.
Should we just say these are the 3, explain to us the scaffolding, that big area. How would you break it down into maybe 3 areas that you would like to educate us on?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I could dig into a little bit about how collaboration has changed across the various industrial eras as a backdrop. And then I'd really like to dive into what an individual brings to that collaboration, becoming a tech-savvy humanist. And then, once we have that sort of individual basis of what skills people are bringing, what are the processes? How do we work together as a team? And then at the higher level, what can the organisation do to structure and design?
All right.
So going individual, team, organisation.
Let's go. First one.
Yeah, first one. Okay, so in collaborating in the digital era, there's this fantastic catchphrase, and it's called becoming a tech-savvy humanist. And it was a term coined, I believe, I dug back a little bit to a 2020 report. It was a report by who was it? Yeah, PwC.
Okay.
And they came out, if we're thinking about our workforce and our leadership going forward, PwC came up with 6 different actually, paradoxes, things that employees need to straddle. And I think one that really speaks to working collaboratively in the workplace today is this idea of being a tech-savvy humanist, which is really someone who understands and embraces technology, but they also deeply value human connection, have empathy, they're ethical in their decision-making. And so I think it's a really nice catchphrase to sort of, what do we want in our people? We want them to be tech-savvy humanists.
Yeah. Tech-savvy humanist. What's a humanist?
Yeah, someone who values human connection. They've got empathy. They reach out and think about the implications. If something is happening, if a software system is making decisions for the organisation, a tech-savvy humanist will then think of the ethical implications that arise from that.
So the topic here, the overall topic, which is your research area and your area of interest, is collaboration. And we decided that maybe for the purpose of the podcast, you can break it down for us maybe in 3 areas of most interest to you. Just frame it for us, 3 areas maybe out of I'm sure it's got 1,000 facets, no doubt. But break it down into sort of 3, 4 areas if you like, and then we can start to dissect them one by one. Please, Catherine.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Look, I think that first point that we'd really like to drill into is really critical is, what does an individual bring to a team, right? What does an individual bring to a collaboration? And, in our current era, we really need to be tech-savvy humanists. We talked about that a bit earlier. And so in this space, it really requires lifelong learning. We need to continually update. Gone are the days where, you go to school, you go to university, and then you dive into your career and you stay there for 5 years, 10 years, definitely 40 years. That was out many decades ago. And so what do we do? How do we as individuals continue to give value to businesses, and how does a business give value back to their employees who are collaborating?
So the question was, what does an employee bring to a team? That's the question you want to dive into, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how do we as individuals, keep up to date so that our collaboration can be alive? It can help us to bring in gross profit % for an organisation. So what do they need to do?
So this question is more for the employee, or also the manager needs to consider that as well when they're designing a team and recruiting and onboarding people in that team? Both, yeah.
Definitely both. Okay. Because the core component to become a tech-savvy humanist, to straddle both, technology and to be collaborative, is that you need to continually update your skills, right? There's new pieces of software out there. There's new ways that AI is changing our workforce. Yet we need to think about, how do we engage in ongoing professional development, and the trend these days is micro courses, short courses, where people are continually updating their information.
Podcasts and whatever. To your point, you're right, and ongoing, continuous small bits and pieces, as opposed to that one big course of 4 years and we're done. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah. So you need your base skills. You need your professional. There's so many areas in our in all industries where you need to get up to a base level to be legally responsible. Whether that's as a lawyer, as an architect. There are certain criteria you need to meet. But it doesn't stop there. And so back to your question about who's responsible. Well, the employee needs to be engaged in this place. They need to be willing to continually update, to work in different ways. But the employer similarly needs to give space to the employee to engage
Ooh,
in
I like
these
that.
ongoing. It's not something you only do in your spare time. It needs to be embedded in how we work.
The word
How do
space
people learn?
is interesting. And I don't know, sometimes I don't do it well sometimes. Get about it to allow people, give people a bit of space, just discover things on their own and stuff. Not as if I'm ever judging an employee if they don't. I'll always encourage them to say, hey, just say, I don't know this. I need to learn it. It's not as if I'm putting pressure on people to know everything. But sometimes they take it for granted. So that's an powerful word. Give employees some space because you're saying that's related in that learning. If something new to them, or maybe they felt it's been upgraded, they need to upgrade themselves about the topic, they need that space, yeah?
And so some companies do it in blocks, right? So if you think of Google, historically they've given employees 20% of their time, that's 1 day a week, to work on a passion project, right? Other companies do it in different ways. So, for example, at the University of New South Wales now, we have lots of short courses that we're required to do for sort of legal purposes, for safety, that kind of thing. But there's also courses that are pushed our way to nudge us to learn more about AI and, how is this going to transform our teaching and how is this going to transform the way we do our research. And so a question I've had recently, and as I'm reading, is, if you do a course for an hour, does it make a difference? Is that enough? What are your thoughts?
It depends. If it's continuous, as I said, you want to upgrade. Let's take an example. The AI stuff.
Yep.
I think you would learn if you do it every day for a couple of months. I think you will learn a lot, and maybe it's better because you're still doing your job. Because, in my opinion, learning is very effective when it's practical. So if I'm a data scientist or a software engineer, and the company said, "Look, we're going to need to work on some AI projects soon. Can you please upgrade your skills?" If you're doing that every day, you started to see how it's going to work with your everyday work and more of a practical. It can be good, yeah.
I came across a paper last year, so 2024, it's recent, in Academy of Management Discoveries, and it was looking at this very issue about what is the impact of these short courses. Tannenbaum, Matthew, and Licino,
Okay.
and they're very rigorous researchers, and they were looking at, if you do a short course to prepare you for ongoing learning, so to teach you to learn how to learn, went for an hour, it sort of covered, how do you review material, how do you learn from conversations with other people, very short, sharp, an hour, you could do it in your lunchtime, right? A group lunchtime, bring in some pizzas, doesn't make a difference. And they very rigorously showed that it enabled, it set people up to perform, right? So it changed their mindsets. Then when people engaged with a new project at work, those projects were much more successful.
Okay.
And so I think it's a really powerful study to show that, our learning doesn't have to be large chunks. You need the base expertise, but then we can update regularly.
Yeah.
And I think back to your point then is, once you have an appreciation of a new skill in a short course, how do you make that land softly and make difference to the gross, to the profit level of a business? And so I think
Land softly. Why does it need to
softly.
land softly? Why not sharply?
You could go and do a course. And then you come back and you don't have the time to implement it. Do you have the space, or do you have so many deadlines that you can't play with this new idea?
True.
How can you share this new knowledge with your colleagues? So knowledge, when we're working collaboratively, if we're working on code, a piece of software doesn't come from one software engineer. It comes from a group of us.
Needs
So
sponsorship,
how
needs
do you
consensus.
know what I know? and how can you then kick new tasks to me? And so, when we engage in this short, sharp learning in bite-sized pieces, how do we give space to sharing that information in an organization? And something I see working really effectively is when an organization might engage in a hackathon, right?
Yeah.
So you say, right, we're going to spend so many hours over the next week to work on this problem. It's ideation. It's exploring a new way to do code for this product that we're developing, and we're playing. We can make mistakes. We can share the new knowledge that we've learnt in our short courses. So yeah, I think our bite-sized learning needs to land softly in the organisation.
Catherine, if I may bring you back to the main topic, in case I feel I'm a little lost, just to bring the context, to recenter the conversation. We're talking about team collaborations, and we wanted to unpack that topic in sort of main areas. And the first one was, said, how does an employee, I don't want to, I would like, you can use your whatever the exact words that you use, but something along the line of, how does an employee add value to the team or something? So then we started to talk about the micro-learning. Take us back to that question, whatever the exact question was, if you don't mind, and let's start from scratch to that. Because I did ask the question about, is that something, it's on the employee? Is that question for the employee or the company? You said both. And maybe from the perspective of the employee and the company, what does that mean? So we can just unpack that a little bit and then move to the next topic.
Yeah, sure. So if I'm hearing correctly, you're sort of wondering, how does learning help us collaborate?
Well, yeah, how did we start to talk about the learning, which is I absolutely respect, but how was it in connection to the question of how does an employee add value to the team? Was that the question, by the way? Do you mind maybe
Yeah.
using your own words? I don't want to alter it for you.
I love
What was
it
the
because
question?
how do we add value? The first way of looking at collaboration is diving in and what can the individual do? What is the individual responsible for?
Yep.
How can the organisation hold them accountable to being responsible to enabling collaboration to work? And so before we talk briefly about, personality, we have attributes, that could
Okay,
be what
true.
people bring, right? And I suppose what I'm advocating is, when we think about collaboration, what can the individual bring? A love for learning, and
The love for learning.
the love for learning. And so, and sharing and finding new innovative ways, not only efficient ways, but innovative ways to add value to that collaboration. And so, yes, personality and our skill sets, what we learnt at university or what we learnt in our prior jobs is important. But over and above all of that, that love for learning is what an individual can bring to the
Definitely
team.
come around. I can see now that connection, strong connection, if I may say. I can see what you mean, because we are definitely big on that. We want disruption all the time about, what we're doing is this in any team, in any context, for people to are trying to really question what we're doing and is this the best way of doing it, etc. So what you're saying, that love of that curiosity and keep that polished up by the constant learning will enable that naturally. When you are learning, when you're seeing other ways of doing things, other teams in the world doing things, part of your learning, you're going to bring that curiosity and question the norm, I guess, in that team. I can see the connection. Yeah.
Okay. So, love for learning. I think that's what individuals can bring to the team. And I think the way that organizations can help that flourish is to give individuals space for their ongoing learning, those conversations.
Yeah.
And in an increasingly tech world, having technology to nudge us into those conversations, because we're not always in the office. I'd be really interested to hear what you're doing in that space in terms of having an ecosystem or, HR.
Yeah.
Are there spaces in there that nudge for, okay, let's get off the technology now. Let's nudge people back into collaborating and connecting in person, as well as working through
Catherine,
technology?
it's a billion-dollar question. I can tell you exactly from my experience, not making any. It's not an opinion. I'm just going to share, and then
Mhm.
we can analyze that. Took about a few years where physically I was ill almost every day, losing my voice by the end of the day on Zoom, talking to. I felt you're always exerting more energy that's needed. By the end of the day, early COVID day, of when everything became, it was miserable for me. It's the toughest time. Although the demand for the product was there, we were lucky. One of these products that enabled people and teams and HR, for
Mhm.
example, don't need to go and print the contract and sign it. Our
Mm.
technology was already a few years leading to that was completely paperless.
Yep.
So you create the contract from your
We're
browser,
there.
send it to the manager at Sont on behalf of the business, send it to then the employee to sign it on behalf, and it's all paperless. Then you go, welcome aboard. This is what you need to do next, and we're looking forward to seeing you on the 13th of August. And SMSs will go off every couple of days, say, hey, how are things going? Everything's okay. I look forward to see. Like the whole thing was paperless,
Yeah,
and so there was
fantastic.
demand for the product, but oh my God, was the and demanding time almost broke down more than once and kept this company going.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how I did it. The whole Zoom thing was killing me, but there was no choice. It was literally illegal to bring a meeting. But I have to say, Catherine, the tech team right now, product team, state of tech, so that's senior developers, mid-level junior developers, and product people.
Mhm.
Product people they do two hats. They are head of department, so they speak with clients, either head of support or head of implementation. So they talking to clients all the time, constant feedback, and they are part-time job is to be responsible for a particular delivery or particular product. Yeah.
Mm, mm, mm.
And so all these guys, we have the conversation at the so-called, we call it the 11 o'clock meeting. And I started to become comfortable. Maybe that's bad. Maybe that is the question. Maybe I need to question that. It feels right now. I hate to say that. Like, I never thought I'd be saying this. It's not like I'm advocating it. I'm
Mm,
just telling you the truth, and then we can unpack it for better or worse.
mm, mm, mm. So you feel comfortable in that space. So you're
Yeah.
talking that space being the 11
Online
o'clock meeting
with,
or
yeah,
no, or the online?
the online meeting, the 11 o'clock,
Yep, yep.
which is online, about 12 people,
Mhm.
anything from 6 to 12, depending on who's on holidays, who's maybe needs to be on a certain project. We know what they need to do. They don't need to be part of that project meeting, sorry.
Yes.
So between 6 to 12 people, and started to feel comfortable. Is that bad? Is that good? I'm really not judging. I'm telling you the truth.
Yeah, comfortable. So could I just unpack the word comfortable
Yes,
in
please.
terms of, is that comfortable in terms of, do you have a rhythm? Is it comfortable because you're hitting targets? Is it comfortable because you know the group? Like,
Okay. We are, well, now that we said that, maybe it needs to be questioned, but I think anyway, so I'm going to, instead of asserting, I think that we are very efficient. We compete against teams and companies that are literally, I'm not joking, 10 times to 20 times the size, meaning for every employee they have, and we beat them maybe 75% of the time. Very, very effective team and company, especially the product team. However, I don't know. Now we're questioning that. Maybe we can be more efficient. So, nevertheless, I think we are. So that's number one. Why comfortable? Yeah. So I feel good about that aspect of it. The whole meeting feels good in the sense. First of all, the physical exertion is gone. Maybe I've adjusted. Maybe the technology is better.
mm,
So I'm not. I don't feel exhausted by the end of the
mm,
meeting anymore. And that sees, probably 12 months ago or even ago, getting better and better. And the other thing that I can tell you why I say comfortable is one thing, and I've shared that on the podcast before.
mhm,
One thing that as a leader, as the CEO, as the founder, as the product brain and product sort of aspiration, the energy
mm,
person that puts the energy in the product team to inspire people to put in the hours, to be focused, to be creative, to think laterally. Yeah.
mm,
Um, from that point of view, I used to judge myself because I can be sort of larger than life personality. So I'm that person that comes into a meeting and says, guys, what are we doing here? We're falling asleep. Come on. We've got a deadline to do here. What's going on? Yeah. So, but sometimes it can be too much. And I beat myself for 24 hours until the next meeting to try and make up for it. I've always judged myself, what I call, the guys now know that word, the quality of the conversation. Meaning I want to leave the meeting where people feel you can see everybody's inspired. Everybody felt they said their piece no matter what. They said what they want to say, and there's consensus being formed, and everybody is working on whatever we decide, not because Anwar said, because consensus was formed. And that is what I call quality of the conversation. And that is really good, Catherine. I think no team in the world, in my humble opinion, probably is doing this better. So that's what I meant by I feel comfortable. So over to you.
Look, thank you very much for going through that, detailed scenario. I think it gives us a really good exemplar of, what happens in teams that, there's ebbs and flows of, how you're working, high pressure, low pressure, meeting customer demands, those ebbs and flows happen over time. And, I think from the human side of the equation, we can't work at 150% all the time.
Sure.
And so that quality of the conversation, I think, can really, to tie that back to our conversation about the love for learning, is that, it sounds like the quality of conversation in the team here at Martian Logic is, there's a routine about it, there's a familiarity, and all those things are important for knowing, what piece of knowledge you all have, how you can all contribute to the team. And
have a seat at the table for you. I want everybody to feel that they were given the opportunity to say what they think about what we're doing, and for see organically the consensus start to form. This is what I call quality conversation.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you really have good knowledge of, how everyone's going to be contributing to the team. There's ups and downs. Some conversations you leave and go, oh, we could have talked about X or Y. We could have framed it differently. But, that's been human, where we don't have the perfect conversation every time. Correct. I think with the quality of the conversation, what we could potentially overlay there is, it sounds like the quality of the conversation is meeting the customer targets. It's meeting, gross profit percent. And I think, when the love of learning in a team is, these sorts of conversations can stay internal, right? And so, how if we've got the group of programmers, the software engineers sitting around the table, and we're sharing ideas and building product and, meeting new customer expectations, that's great. Yet at some point, there'll be a need to bring in information from outside the team, and so that love of learning needs to sort of balance, what does the business need here and now to deliver what's due today, this week, this month, this financial quarter, and keep scanning on the horizon. Yeah. So what's happening in the space of human resource information systems, in the next 6 months, the next year, the next couple of years, the next decade. And so that love of learning, it's great that there's familiarity in the team. People feel comfortable, they're more likely to perform in that environment. Yet there's actually some work myself, and I suppose this transitions us to sort of the second topic area that I'd like to focus on, building on the love of learning and what we individually bring. How can we continue to inject that in a team? And so I suppose this second thought that I want to put on the table is, the need to look outward. How do we learn so to keep these teams viable in the medium to longer term? And there is, a great, I suppose, we get embedded in our routines where we work and continue to work with our team in the here and now, meet those targets. And so I would encourage, that quality of conversation to embed learning by reaching out and learning from outside of the team as well, not losing sight of that bigger picture.
Totally agree, Catherine. I think that's extremely wise and correct. I see it. We do it indirectly somehow, but nevertheless, I don't want to justify it or something. I just want to acknowledge it's not just about me, about the audience as well. So, no, I agree with you. You're right.
Can I share an example from an engineering company?
Absolutely.
Where this happened? So in one of my funded research projects, I worked with an engineering sales company, Australasian. So embedded, across Australia, New Zealand,
What's
up in
engineering,
Indonesia.
just to be of an idea?
They sold engineering parts and products and services. So ball bearings,
Okay.
mine shift, electronic shafts. They sold into mining industry, fast manufacturing, car industry when we had that in Australia.
Catherine, when you say they sold, as in they create and sell, as in they create the product or they just sell it?
They on-sold it, and they also added value by bringing different engineering
and maybe
products
implementing
together
it somehow.
and implementing solutions.
Beautiful.
Yeah?
Makes sense.
And so in this organisation, I was invited in because they had a problem. They had flatlined gross profit percent. So over a number of years, they couldn't shift their profit margins. Right? They tried all sorts of things. First, they jumped to training, love of learning. Let's send people on courses, on diplomas, on MBAs. And yes, that increased engagement, but didn't increase the bottom line.
Got it. Interesting.
I'm not advocating that always plays out. That was in this particular context. It didn't. They looked at, the marketing protocols, in their product catalogs, they looked at increasing, the gross profit percent on each item, right? And that didn't shift. And so when I came in, it was the organisational development director who was implementing a new way, a new quality of conversation. Say, come back to what we were talking about before.
Yep.
And so they did a bit of an experiment. So when I came in, it was a business conglomerate of 27 businesses, right? And so there were a couple of large business units. There was one business unit where they didn't touch the teams. These engineering branches that were around Australasia. They just enabled the quality of the conversation to continue as it was. And then in another group, another business unit, they implemented different types of conversations where they were encouraging people to connect their best practices, not just in their branch, but, if you're in the mining industry, what's happening with all the other mining industry branches at the same time. So they engaged in sort of this prognostication, these ideas about, what's going to happen in our industry in 6 to 10 years time. And so it prioritized work differently. It wasn't just about rearranging products on the shelf. It wasn't about, we need to work longer hours. We need to have a shorter lunch break. It isn't, how we greet the customers when they come into the branches. It was very much thinking about, where's the direction of the mining industry or whatever industry was their customer base.
The macro conversation versus the micro thing.
Yep. And
I
so,
think that, to your point, Catherine, I'm so sorry to interrupt you there, but I can see from the engagement of that would be are engaged in long-term outlook and stuff. They feel out, they feel expected, they feel validated. That's when I talk about the qualification. When I say you have a seat at the table, that means whatever the heck I talk about, you can. I believe it's not relevant. I will acknowledge the point, move on quickly. I'll share the conversation in an effective way, but people can say what they say, and they feel really the engagement, I believe, very important. Because when you're doing long hours as a developer, we only do long hours Monday to Thursday, actually 3 days a week, and out of the 5, and the others are half day, kind of start at midday or whatever hours. So nevertheless, it's pretty heavy stuff. We pay people well and people do really solid weeks, let's call them. Yeah. You do want to in this conversation, maybe not talk about the actual just dev stuff. Maybe you want to talk about the company. Maybe you want to talk about IBM. Maybe you want to talk about Google. People feel, I'll let that conversation flow because they feel this is part of the vision, part of where the industry is going. I'll let that go. Sometimes for half an hour, we'd be talking nothing to do with the project directly. So I definitely connect with you. I can start to see why that was useful in that organization to engage in a long-term use of the industry. People feel creative. They feel also respected. I'm part of that conversation. I'm invited to talk about it. I'm validated. I'm respected.
And so it's thinking outside of the square. It's thinking, what's happening in other teams in our organization? How are they learning? How are our competitors learning? What can we do some, intelligence, on them, or what's happening outside of, what's happening in our suppliers or, in our customers' business? What are the problems on their horizons that we're going to need to solve next? And so by giving that bigger picture, it inspires that motivation and love for learning
100%.
and creates it as a collective conversation.
Yeah. And in terms of the impact on their bottom line, how did that?
Turned around. So slumping team performance had an upkick. And
So what's the
there was
mechanic there? Do you believe this kind of quality of the conversation or this sort of, the type of conversations when it's shifted to look at the long views of the industry, of things around them, of where this is going, etc. How do you feel this kind of the flow effect to why it ended up impacting the bottom line? Can you unpack that a little bit? Did you guys do some? Clearly, you must have done some analysis on that.
Yeah. So the question we had was, who instigated these conversations, right? Was it their line managers or was it somebody different? And what was really neat about this work we did with the engineering organization is that they had a shift in the organizational structure. They changed the way they designed the organization to nudge these conversations. So, the branch managers were at their wits' end, just meeting the gross profit percent targets to demanding customers on the line. My machine's broken down again. You got the wrong ball bearing again,
Yeah.
So, they were just trying to meet the everyday needs.
Sure.
And so what this company did differently was to embed a business development manager. Now, that sounds, a bit ad hoc, but they did it in a very systematic way. So there was like a hub of employees that worked across initially just Australia, but they had a region that oversaw, 3 to 8 branches with a similar customer base. And so their role was to instigate these conversations. And people go on holidays. And so the beauty of this hub was that although a business development manager was allocated to a group of branches, there was always, backups there,
Being a business development manager, just for me, if you don't mind, and perhaps the audience as well. So in terms of why that particular title, and I know maybe I should have let you finish in terms of what they did, but I can clearly start to see that they are engaged with their client base. Would that be the case? And then bring in maybe some of that knowledge and need and effect and feedback into that conversation for those folks, right?
Interesting. So, perhaps that title has role descriptions that go with it, right? So let me back up and just call it a support hub. So these people who had been in the business already, they weren't hired as a business development manager, so didn't, and their role was to share best practice amongst the branches, to get the teams to think outside of the square, to think about learning, from their customers, from the other branches, that love of learning, but not in the immediate to meet the deadlines. It's sort of like, well, my customers had this problem with the ball bearing now. They're on the phone shouting at me. But, what's the larger cause of this? Are there other mechanical issues that we can help them solve, that we can add value to that customer base? And so the beauty of this support hub was that the whole role or group of roles of supporting the branches was dedicated to learning, to encouraging this, understanding of the situation, and it was happening at the front line. It was hearing the problems of the customers and getting the branches to engage in that strategic conversation rather than, the directors sitting up in headquarters solving all the problems when they were 3 steps removed in a tall hierarchy. And so empowered people at the front line to think creatively, to expand their careers, to see how they could add value to the customers.
Yeah, I can see that. That's pretty clever. I guess a small organisation like ours probably even is definitely learning, not as challenging because they are dispersed all over the world. That organisation you're talking about, so it clearly takes more of an effort to implement such a thing. Kate, that kind of a new approach of, hey, we don't want to just fix the problem. Take your head out of the box a little bit. Let's understand why it happened in the first place. How could we have done something whereby instead of this thing breaking down every 6 months, maybe it can break down every 5 years? What else, what other people are doing? Let's take a little moment. It's okay if it's not fixed by 5 p.m. Let's talk to the client, tell them tomorrow, and maybe use that time to learn a little bit. How can we do it better? To do that, I think when you've got operations across the country, it does take a lot of effort to start to get that culture of get this kind of approach embedded within the culture. Yeah, it is an effort.
And what I find really inspiring about this example is that it's not a complete organizational change, right? You're not going from a tall hierarchy into a flat organization. They've just carefully inserted a new small group of people to encourage the quality of the conversations.
Who are those group of people? They sound like they're kind of magicians. I mean, how do you even get these group of people to be communicating with the rest of the people and make sure the company? I mean, it sounds like still it's got a lot of nuances to it to implement such a thing, and some risk as well to it. Because it sounds like we sent the specialist. I mean, it shouldn't be like that. It should be more organic. This kind of culture should be more organic approach, as opposed to a bunch of specialists now were spread around the country and the problem was solved in 6 months, like Superman kind of hero stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's something that doesn't sit right in my head still.
Yeah, interesting. And so I'm just trying to understand what doesn't sit right.
Those individuals that we trained them. We brought some people from somewhere, a specialist assassins kind of thing. We brought them into the head office. We trained them on what they need to do. We gave them the ninja swords and sent them to all these branches. Like, who are these people? How do you train them? And when they are actually dispersed out there, how do you keep them communicating? And I mean, what you're trying to do, you're trying to enforce a certain cultural change whereby we want to question things. We want to welcome questioning things in meeting. We don't want to just solve the problem as we've always done it. We want to question why this thing keeps breaking down every 6 months. Why this client keeps saying, I'm really not sure about this, but I keep buying it from you because you're the only supplier. All these things, I mean, there's so many signs, breadcrumbs must be everywhere. For you to start to say, we want to pay more attention. We want to pay attention to those nuances and see what we can learn from them. Let's build long-lasting things. Let's build long views about our value proposition, what we do in this world and in the sector. And how can you just think 5, 6 people we're going to train and send out there into the empire and they're going to make all the change?
So in the case of this engineering organisation, they recruited into this position, into this support hub, for people who were long-term employees. So they had a deep knowledge of products and services.
That sounds
right?
good.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
So it was a career opportunity for them. It was creating a sideways move.
Yeah. Don't
necessarily want to take on the more responsibility, perhaps the hours that go with it. So they had a deep knowledge of the products and services.
Yeah.
And I suppose, what is happening in organisations today is a real appreciation of soft skills, right? So these employees were noted for how they had quality conversations. Did they collaborate with people? Did they listen? Or were they type of person who came in and flew in as the expert and, I know this is the product, this is the solution. So they had those good quality interaction, collaborative skills that they listened and they networked, right? And so they were good at bringing different disparate groups of people together. So they were noted for having deep connections and relationships with suppliers and with the customers over time. And so it was this combination of, coming back to this, the tech savvy humanist, they had the technical knowledge of the organization. They had the human skills and were appreciated for having that in the organization. And I suppose they were elevated into a position where they could share that with others.
I like it.
And so it was transitioning from creating value by how many ball bearings, how many drive shafts, how many pieces of engineering equipment can I sell, to how can we compile these products into a service so that it reduces the downtime of our customers.
Made me think there's something really based and good about the way you've described it. It made me feel about, when you go to a hardware store, before I say Bunnings, in case someone not from Australia, but let's say a large hardware store, and they have, they hire ex tradies, for example, an ex-plumber, someone in their 40s or 50s, but with the right kind of mindset. And you see them when they're walking around, you go, that is an approachable but seasoned tradie person that I could learn from. And you approach them, and sure enough, they have the patience for you, the professionalism, the right tone, etc. And it's like the best experience ever. They share 30 years of skills, of experience out there in the real world to give you the advice about whether you buy this type of wood or this type of wood, and they question why you're doing this. And so tell me what you're trying to do. I wouldn't even buy wood at all. I would actually do that. Whoa, it sounds like that, right?
Yeah.
I think there's something really organic about that. I like that.
Yeah. And look, I'm talking about, we've kind of shifted to what is the quality of the conversation. We've gone from the love of learning, the quality of the conversation needs to be learning internally and externally. And so I've sort of jumped ahead to, well, how do organizations design? And, I suppose what I'm encouraging now in the conversation is that we need to embed these supports, embed ways to collaborate in organizations. So this support hub in this engineering firm occurred, it was over 2 years that we saw the increase in gross profit percent. We're talking millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars, just sort of at one business unit level. Yeah. That's not expanded over the 27 that they had. Yeah. And so, it's a slow change, but that's okay, because it's looking at medium to long-term value creation. It's not about the deadline that we met. So, these support hub people met with their branch as a group or with the branch manager once a week, once a fortnight. It's not an intensive intervention, but it's just a continual nudge. How do we keep having these conversations as humans in our organizations that is separate from the technology? Is there something in the technology that nudges us to have these conversations? Yeah.
Okay. We're going to take 1 minute break, and we'll be back in a minute. So we're back from the break, everyone, and we are with Catherine Collins, Associate Professor at University of New South Wales here in Sydney, Australia, right?
Yes.
Got it right. Cool. And so we're talking about teams, and in particular collaboration within teams. And I've asked you if we can somehow dissect it into maybe 3 main areas, so we can, maybe cover those areas to a certain depth within the hour and a half of a podcast.
Yes.
If we can. Clearly, we will never be able to do it real justice. It's an incredibly big topic. You can write 20 books about it, let alone an hour and a half of podcast.
True.
So, yeah, and we talked about, remind me, what was that first topic that we sort of covered?
Yeah, we were jumping in and thinking about, well, in collaboration, what can the individual do?
Sure.
And so there we were diving in on the love of learning and how that's so important to encourage and develop our skills as
Beautiful.
tech-savvy humanists
Yeah.
in today's world.
Yes, and you took us through a real life example that was very valuable. People love to learn from stories, and that was like you telling a story that was so engaging. I really thank you. I really appreciate that. An experiment that you're not going to clearly disclose the name of the organization, but something that you worked with an organization who made the change, and that was a major element of why they were able to bring back a higher profit in their business.
Gross
Correct?
profit. Yeah. And so I suppose that example really sort of jumped across all three areas that I want to dive into with you. That example was talking about the love of learning. What did the organisation do to spark the love of learning? Did they send them off to courses, long courses, or did they embed it in their work design every day?
Makes sense.
And that's what they did. And so that's what took us to sort of the second level part of the conversation, which is really about what do we do as a team? How do we have those conversations? And you were jumping in on that about the quality of conversation and how you found that really critical here in your business. And so then I challenged you to think about, well, is it the quality of conversation here within this team now, or is it also connecting with other teams, that needing to take that bigger picture?
Okay, so this is the second part of what we want to cover today.
Yeah, looking outwards. And so by looking outwards, in the quality of the conversations, how do we do that as an organisation? And we need to sort of embed it in the work design. And so that's
looking outwards. Let's dive right into it. I still don't know what looking outwards is.
Let's
go.
Okay, so we're a team here doing a podcast. We're learning from one another. It's a great quality conversation, and that will help us to learn, to be more effective in our jobs. But at some point in time, the conversation becomes insular.
Sure.
Separate.
Sure.
So
ecosystem.
Yeah.
As in echo, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So what
Echo
are
chamber.
our other networks?
It's the ecosystem. Correction. Echo chamber. Yeah.
The echo chamber. Yeah.
Sure.
We might, learn from so much from one another over a period of time that we reinforce each other's ideas. And so looking outward is ensuring that we connect with other people, our professional backgrounds, you've, come from a software, engineering background, I'm from human resource management. What do we do within those networks to learn as well? What do we...
In other words, see what other people are thinking about these topics out there anywhere in the world, as a matter of fact, as broadly as possible.
Yep.
Sure. Anybody would agree with that. Yeah.
And so I suppose, with teams in organizations, often they become insular. So the quality of conversation may be there, but there's some points where you need to maybe jumpstart it and connect them with some different customers.
This is why when I was talking about, I used the word comfortable, you were a little bit suspicious and curious about that, whether this became insular. Are you really looking outwards enough? Interesting. I really respect you for doing that. I don't believe we are, but you've made me conscious of continuing to question that now. Yeah, sure. I like that.
And so, I suppose that's where, we could, learn from customers, learn from suppliers, who else in our ecosystem is important for us to create value. So that's what I mean by looking outwards. Teams are really not that static anymore. And so, how can we cross-pollinate that learning within the business, externally to the business?
Okay. How do we do that? And clearly smaller companies versus larger companies, the challenge is different. Larger companies, multiple locations, multiple countries, wherever. To make that change, to implement changes that will naturally, I don't want to use the word force, but that will naturally make those teams look outwards, could be more challenging than smaller companies. So what did you learn about that, and what are some of the things that maybe can be done in a systemic way that will naturally and organically see these teams doing it without even trying. Is that such a thing or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my question then would be for the small businesses, where are they currently adding value to the company, in terms of, can they learn what their customers' problems are? Do they have problems with supply chain? And so by, you know, ex, you know, small businesses don't work in isolation, but rather it's building on the everyday problems that they stall across.
Okay. So looking outwards, make sure you and your team, although the conversation is great and everybody's respectful and people look forward to those convos, but you need to be questioning, have they become an echo chamber, reinforcing the other person's idea, because not going outside of this and seeing what other people across the world, as a matter of fact, in industry, etc., are doing to challenge what you are doing. So not necessarily. So the quality of the conversation in terms of respect and having a seat at the table, that's probably going well, but still not good enough. Even though all the team members are able to challenge and say what they think, still maybe not good enough if you're not really making a deliberate effort to see what other people, companies, teams, etc., researchers in that field are doing. Yeah, is that what we're really saying?
Yes. Yep. It's looking and having conversations with outsiders. It reminds me of some work by Adam Grant, and he looked at call centers. Call centers where they're trying to raise money. People are getting knockbacks every day. There's those phone calls that come between 5 and 7 p.m. when you're trying to have family dinner or finish up your work for the day. And what really changed the learning in those teams was creating a connection with the people that they were raising money for, right? So it was a call center in a university, and they were calling up alumni to give donations to the university. And so what they did to motivate and inspire learning within these teams was to get the call center employees to talk to the people that they had raised funds for, right? And so how did it turn their lives around? Maybe no one in there, they talked to a award recipient who had come to university. No one in their background had come to university, and so how to transform their life by receiving these funds. So I think it's about changing the everyday work design so that people can sort of step away from their deadlines. I need to make X amount of money, and connect with the true purpose of what's driving that value for the organisation.
So true. I can connect with that big time, Catherine. I must have said this about a zillion times in the last 10 years. Anybody that knows me, even professionally, would know this about me. I always say that when the robots take over, the only job that matters for a professional, especially in a company where you're inventing a product, right, is the quality of I'm going to say it in a silly way, quality of the conversation that you're having with the end user about what really, really is the cause issue. What is really you're trying to do? What is that pain point? Because, I use this example, I don't know if you're going to like it or not. I say, the people, and actually, as we speak, tick probably is done by 5 million people around the world as we speak. You see people spraying these silly chemicals that they buy from I don't know where on tree leaves and plants because the plant is dying or something. And I'm going, you've got to look at the root first. Don't you want to see what what you're feeding that thing, what's living in, what's this thing spraying on the leaves, How could you possibly make that tree come back to life? So the root cause it's such a silly thing because that's the actual word we say that, but it became, people say it and it doesn't mean anything anymore. They say the root cause. They don't actually think what they're saying. When that word was invented, I don't know whether it's 10,000 years old or 500 years old, but it actually meant the root cause, the root of the tree. What is, because what happens is, and I say it in every respectful way to a client, you ask a client, they're not happy with something, with a feature, with something they're using within a product. So that's in the context of a software product that I understand, which is related to Martian Logic. And they're going to tell you within sort of a minute or two, they're passionate, they love you. Even we're talking about supporters, clients that really love you, love your product, love your energy, what you're doing for them. They seem to be within a minute or so, the first, what we call layer of the onion of the conversation.
Yes.
They seem to sort of tell you two things. A little bit about what the problem is, but mostly, unfortunately, they're telling you about what they think the solution is or should be.
Yes.
And that's not good. You want to, as a professional, you want to ignore the 80% completely, somehow in a respectful way, without telling them you're doing that, and come back to that 20% that you might have revealed something about the root cause and take it back. So the conversation becomes, when you're deeper in the onion, 100% about the root cause, about the pain points. Who is it affecting negatively and why? Why are we doing this? What is the real issue? Is it efficiency? Is it, customer employee experience, in our case, being an HR system? What is it really you're trying to do? So that's the one thing, in my opinion, the robots will never, ever be able to take away from us. Cutting code and stuff, I mean, if you haven't seen this coming, seriously, you shouldn't be in the software industry. Code, as opposed to languages that have got so many nuances, code doesn't have that. Code is, syntax, strong on syntax. Of course the robot can reproduce that. Seriously, you're trying to think this wasn't going to happen? But the quality of the conversation, I mean, for you as a human being, to even have the right personality and influence and to even, for that client, for that particular stakeholder to even want to meet with you, that's a huge achievement. Let alone open up to you, let alone really take these 20,000 questions from you to get to the root problem. That is a huge achievement. And once you understand, this is when the work starts. When you feel you've hit the jackpot to really understand the root cause, that's when you even have a chance. I know you still have to build a product and market it and sell it and but mate, without this, you will never have a sustainable, long-term sustainable business. You'll always be building Band-Aids. It will be a house of cards. It'll collapse. It'll have no value, the company you're building.
And look, I really value how you've taken this conversation about, the need to look outwards and the need for love for learning in a team to be looking outwards. It struck me when you said, isn't that obvious? We need to connect to our professional groups and our customers and our suppliers. And, that's obvious. And I think, if we're sitting around a table, yes, it is obvious. But what I really enjoyed with that example about the root cause and, with technology there is that, given our work is increasingly becoming more digitalized and more driven and helped by AI and other digital tools, often those technology tools look inward. And I want to jump on that with another example. If we think of technology and how process engineering can help us in an organization. So process engineering is...
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. So it's when you have large databases within an organization, within your organization, or it might be a hospital, or it might be an architecture firm. And so it's a process of mining that data to understand where, historically, where the efficiencies are. So in data mining, in this last week, I've been involved with architecture firms, and they've been looking at how process engineering may be able to help the architect, computational designers, identify, is there a series of how a piece of software is used that can be more efficient? Are there less clicks to get to the same outcome?
Okay.
Is there, different sequences of the software that can be used to create better value for the customer? And so process engineering is going back into the data that sits within the cloud to try and find efficiencies to better give value to the organization. And so historically, this, process engineering process has been very much the focus on engineering. And so with the partner organizations, we're exploring the question about, well, why aren't architecture firms using process engineering? It's heavily used in logistics, it's used in healthcare, and one of the I was very impressed with how the architecture firms were thinking about this, because they were highlighting how the process engineering software that we were looking at looked internally within the organization. It didn't map, what were the conversations outside of the computational architects, what were they doing? What were they learning? How was that improving the process? And so, I think with technology, if we're trying to find efficiencies in how we work, it's very easy to, pull out the data and find a more efficient way of doing it. But, what's really important is not only, what are we doing in our day-to-day tasks, but how do we intersect that with our conversations where we're learning? And so, in architecture firms, they're not only just looking at, how the pieces of software are being used, they also use another piece of software. It's called BIM Beats, and it's sort of like, well, what hours are people working? And so then it's orchestrating this very delicate balance about, how efficiently are we using our software licenses, but then, are we pushing the pedal too much on the human side of the equation? Are we, by trying to maximize our software licenses, does that mean that we are then, creating really long hours for our employees?
Interesting.
Are the employees having opportunities? Back to our break earlier, is there time in their week to learn and have conversations from one another? And so, I suppose a concern that keeps me up at night is really about, well, what's happening in our organizations to nudge internal conversations. And I think, technology gets us to look internally. And we need excuses, we need design, we need managers to nudge people to have those conversations where we,
which is the outwards. So you're saying technology is naturally pushes us and nudges us inwards, and we want to remain conscious about the potential problem and have those constant reminders and to bring the opportunity and make it happen to really look outwards.
And how can we design our technology to nudge those conversations, right? So some of the features that I've been seeing broadly reported in computer science is where automation processes occur in phases, right? Normal sort of work phases that would occur. And so it's not that analysis and automation keeps churning away, but, is there a natural point where the human needs to have conversation, so the analysis stops? So is there a phase then where humans are brought back in to make a decision on what data is next analysed?
You've already inspired me on 3 things that I want to implement and be mindful of. I'm immensely grateful, including what you just said there. Very, very, very interesting. Okay. So should we move to the third point? Or
Sure.
if you would like to summarize that point, you're welcome. Or if you want to now frame the third part of what you're passionate about this whole designing teams and collaboration within teams by any means, but yeah.
Yeah. So the second point was really about, encouraging people to have processes that think outside of the team that they're working in, and that technology may nudge us to have internal conversations and look for internal efficiencies. But it's those external conversations with customers, with suppliers, with different teams in the organizations that helps us see where we add value. And it's the people at the front line that need to have those. That's not only a strategic
People on
conversation.
the people on the front line. In our case, there's 4 teams: sales, account management, support, implementation. They are having these conversations. I think, for us, the challenge is, and I think we do it really well, on someone needs to size us from the outside, not me, for us to really, we're doing it well, not, but in my opinion, what I know we're doing well. However, what I'm talking about is of how do you take these conversations, the learnings from this conversation? How does the company create a mechanism for these conversations to be funneled through into the decision-making process? So
I think that may be where technology comes back in again, right? So if you're having a weekly stand-up meeting, might be calling it the weekly toolbox meeting at the end, where you're gathering these ideas. Are they consolidated and put into a larger pool of idea suggestions? Are they fed back up to managers? Are they fed back up to a 2-up conversation higher up in the organization? Yeah, I think it is important not just to have those isolated conversations in the separate silos of the organization.
no, absolutely. So, as I said, these are the 4 or 5 teams that speak with clients. And personally, as the CEO and the brain of the product, and I also have my own conversations directly with clients and prospects. So you've got these conversations, but also those 4. See, every one of these 4 teams, they're encouraged to, they feel alarm about, literally, as soon as they finish the call me straight away. That's how much channel of feedback I've got. They know we build the product and refine the product and the strategy from all these. So I feel that we're doing it really well, but see, companies are systematic, some kind of system, and maybe technology could help make sure we channel all the feedback in a way that things don't get lost and all that. I can see that can be challenging. Yeah.
And a great example of a large organization where where this can go terribly wrong was a great piece of work in by Microsoft. And being Microsoft, they had access to all the data that was all online during COVID's, in their team system, through Outlook, in their calendars. And they had the pre-COVID situation, where people were in the office, business as usual, and then we moved online. And they analysed this, and it was written up in Nature Human Behaviour. And this piece of information is fascinating, because you would think with moving digitally, you have easy access to the CEO of such a large organisation or people 2-up. And what they saw by pulling all these disparate data sources from the software is that teams became more insular by using technology.
Yeah, I can see that.
They consolidated, they became more rigid. And so that's why I keep asking and really interested going forward, how are software companies nudging and folding in people into, what happens automatically? I think it's a question that we need to face in the coming years.
Okay. So you described this problem as something that you lose sleep over. Is that correct? Something that you're really concerned about. Remind me again, how do you frame that problem?
Yeah. I am really interested in, what can organisations do systemically to make sure that technology helps us, helps us with a love of learning, helps us to think outside of the square. And what can we do as managers and in the organisational design to keep nudging people to be human, to have those conversations. So what keeps me up awake at night? I think it's that, being conscious how we design software. How can we bed more human elements?
Software in general, as opposed to more of the concern right now. No, you're right. I did ask that question at the beginning. I said, is it because, are you more alarmed because of the AI improvements in AI and the adoption of AI? But to your point, you did say even COVID, the use of Zoom or these kind of technologies all of a sudden, and that was also part of your concern, and rightly so, yeah?
And I mean, we look at that technology now, and that's
Yeah.
very basic in terms
Yeah.
of what we
Yeah.
use in the workplace.
And that made a huge cultural change, potentially about this point of having conversations and stuff, how some people not comfortable over Zoom, more comfortable in person, whatever. Definitely, this technology has made a lot of changes, and we haven't seen the end effect on teams, companies, culture yet. Certainly, we probably just started now to see the big. We were sort of still up until now, almost in the middle of it. Now we started to see data and stats and effects and trends, stuff set by that, right?
Yeah.
So that's fascinating.
And so I'm interested, from your standpoint,
Yeah.
working in a software company,
Yeah.
are there concerns about collaboration being digital?
As I said, you've opened my eyes about some things that maybe I've assumed, and now I want to question that. But I mean, got two or three teams: the commercial teams, the account management team, and sales team. They come to the office. They do 3 days a week from the office and 2 from home. Um, and 90% of our business is developed online. A demonstration, for example, it's not anymore unusual. You're not doing it wrong. It seems to be the standard. So you're not worried, if I offer online, my competitor could be doing in person, and I might be it might be losing a deal, might be not looking, appearing to be as keen or, and, therefore less competitive. Seems to be the standards. Everybody's doing it, and we are doing it for better or worse. I do encourage, I've got it in my ads that you've got to be someone who believes in in-person meetings, willing and enjoys traveling and meet with people. So you would see that on in my ads when I'm looking for salespeople. I do believe in it, and I do say to people, you've got the budget to travel. You make the call when you want to travel. We always back you up as a sales individual. So I'm trying to answer your question. The developers, to bring them to an office, to work from an office, I cannot even see where I would start with this conversation, for better or worse. I'm not suggesting that this is good or not. Speaking of looking outwards, I would like to do some research now to see where we stand compared to other product companies, software product companies in Australia, for example. But I feel I've got some teams where it is probably insular, but I really don't feel that I know exactly what's going on although I trust the leaders there. Would it be better? Should I blame it on the fact that not in the office? I'm not really sure. As opposed to, I'm guilty of not putting some system in place or getting into some of the meetings, join some of those meetings on a weekly basis and ask the question, getting to know these people. So maybe it's my fault. I don't
think
know.
it's not a fault question. I think it's the and this is really the third how do we design organization, much more complex now. We used to think, how many layers of management do we have? How many teams do we have? Do we base those teams based on products, or do we base those teams based on, client bases or markets? Whereas now we have all of those decisions about how do we structure our businesses in addition to, well, how much is face-to-face, how much is online, and how do we balance these tensions? A large part of the conversation is, sitting where you are, in that happy middle where, have some face-to-face to make sure you still have those sort of water cooler conversations, those sort of haphazard bumping into people a bit more randomly where you share information, as well as the very structured, efficient time where you might be doing the long hours. Let's hear about coding. It's the same in architecture firms with computational architects. They're very heavy on the coding thing. So I think, there's a delicate balance there in terms of face-to-face and what's then online. And it's going to differ by industries. What we know doesn't work is when we mandate people to come into the office, right? All of the time.
But why is this complicated? Why is human resource it's kind of complicated? Why did it? Because the competitiveness of the world? Is it because companies are trying to find an edge to and human resources, therefore efficiency stuff becomes so important? And why, therefore, we need to dig into all that nuances, and therefore it's a science and research and intelligent people self become professors in that field. And sometimes I feel, are we is there really something we're missing that's so simple? Where did that come from? Is it, if you
Well, if you
think
look at your
about
balance sheet, right? If we're thinking it purely from a business perspective, is that in a balance sheet, the highest tag item for costs or human capital
yeah,
is people.
yeah,
And they're not a piece of code. We have intrinsic motivations, we have extrinsic motivations, and given in almost every business, until we become automated with AI, it is going to be, the biggest line item in terms of cost. And as human beings, we have different motivations, and that's really where the science comes from. And human resource management combines psychology. It combines sociology. We have very different fields, but I think question is, how does it be created?
as we became more populated and bigger cities and more sophisticated factories, products being built, and people having to work with close vicinity from each other and larger teams, 1,000 people, then crowded place, and start to talk about, anxieties and effects of fairness and blah 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 comes into it. I guess you can argue even 10,000 years, and no matter what, even ape society right now trying to build, trying to have a bunch of people, some of these apes monitoring the territory to see other people coming in. How do you create that army of 4 apes running around the perimeter? You could organize them in a way that they're more efficient and they work together and they care about each other. They would do a better job. So it is organic. Is any kind of group of creatures trying to do a task together.
And as you say, work has intensified, whether that be, from the early industrial era, from moving to factories to speeding that up with electricity. And now we're, the 5th industrial revolution with AI and, the need to inject humanity into that. At the heart of, these large organizations, or even small businesses, is a deep tension about, how much are things rigid, driving efficiency, versus how much flexibility do we give people?
Mm. I guess what's the foundation at part of all this is when you think about companies and people
Mhm.
who are in these companies. At the heart of all this is if we really distill it to a very simple form, which
Mhm.
could be offensive to a lot of people, especially professionals that feel like you. It really is happy shareholders, happy employees.
Mhm.
Really, this is what we're trying to do. Because
Mhm.
even the fairness and all kind of nuances, it's going to come back to whether you're happy or not.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, how many hours are you rewarded correctly? Is it fair compared to other teams? All kind of stuff stems to happy employees, happy shareholders, right?
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
really what we're trying to do, to create
Mhm.
that balance, right?
Mhm.
And I guess if that's the case, this is organic. You can see it was there 10,000 years ago, and it's going to be here in the next million years.
And I suppose in my conversation, what I've encouraged us to do is to sort of think about, that challenge about, happy stakeholders and happy employees, from different levels. What can we do as individuals? What can we bring to work? Then what can we do to set up teams to achieve those outcomes? And then what can we do at the organisational level? Because if you take any one of those, the passion for learning at the individual level, you take about, how you share that learning internally and externally at the team, or then how you structure the organisation at a larger level to enable this collaboration. If you only take it at one level, the other levels are going to erode, right? So you could employ someone who has a passion for learning, right? But then you don't give them space in the organizational design to continue that learning in their work and to share that with their team.
Well, to
Then it's going to be
practice in a
eroded.
sense, try and reduce it. And this is what you talked about, to soft landing of that, meaning how they can bring some of that learning and try and test it out in their real job is part of that space, part of you taking a risk, allow them to do that. You're right. It does take maturity and deliberate, sort of strategy by management to allow for that to happen. Otherwise, just learning, they continue to learn, and whenever they want to bring any of these ideas, they go, no, not today, whatever, too risky. Then you're right, that will not going to work. So it is a strategic and deliberate investment to make that work. And, I cannot even see, to your point, that's probably so important. I cannot even see it otherwise. How are you going to continue to grow and continue to stay up to date? Because you know what I say to my people, every developer in our business will know this about me. Say to them, I want you to, for us, it's like a double-edged sword. I want you to be always sharp, that you're so employable that we can lose you. I don't want you to be a blunt tool. So you have no option, but you stay with us. Oh my God, this is the worst thing. I want you to stay here to be sharp, but you still want to be here. This is the only way. So that double-edged sword. So I'm getting you to learn so you become employable. So if I piss you off, you can go somewhere else. So I don't piss you off, but at the same time, you're happy because you're happy and you're learning. Well, why do you want to go anywhere else? So because I always, when people say to me, as you're recruiting right now, and ask them the question all the time, so why this job? What's important for you, job now, where you're at in life? For you to be really happy, driven, motivated, excited about your job? What are the top 3 things, And to me, I always say it's having a seat at the table, learning all the time, staying sharp, meaning employable. Our brain, they know it without even saying it. When they are learning, they don't have to, like subconsciously, they know I'm employable. They don't have to even think about it every day. But as long as they feel they are learning, they know they are employable, they are comfortable, they're happy, they feel secure, that sense of security. So if I go back to the list of 3 things, it's the having a seat at the table, your opinion is heard and respected, learning, and the money. Because, the money, it's important because you've got to be validated. I can say how amazing you are, but it pays you under the market. It's got to be after a while thinking, he's probably bullshitting me. I'm not validated. The money sort of validate you, even if you weren't a greedy person. Yeah.
And so that comes back to my point before about you need different things in the organization for that cross-validation and to support one another, because, if you're happening at the team level and you've got great quality conversations and you're giving good feedback, but it's being eroded at the organizational level because there's not the remuneration processes to back that up, you're undermining the words of the team leader. And so it's this delicate juggle. What I found really interesting in the conversation there was about, why is it so difficult, right? Why? And so what I'm hearing in that, and I could be wrong, is, why isn't this a black and white science?
Oh, my initial question about why is this complicated? Yeah. In terms of getting people to gel and be nice to each other and work in a collaboration. Why is it so complicated? It's a science. Oh my God! Why?
And I think it's this delicate balance act. If I
it's
just jump in
question
there,
that every now and then, right?
Yeah, I mean, and so I would encourage businesses to start on an experiment to to build collaboration in their organizations, but it doesn't mean that you need to constantly adjust things, right? So if I think of the example of Zappos, company, out of the US, they went radical a number of years ago, and they changed their organizational structure. It was a very hierarchical structure. They were finding that people weren't engaged. There were, huge levels of management, and then they shifted to a much more organic, team-based. It was called holacracy, where you have small circles of group working together, and you collaborate to figure out your roles. And the idea was that, by people self-designing their work, that they could be more empowered. They could bring in the innovations and ideas from customers. And it worked for a while. It definitely boosted morale and engagement, and, applications to work in Zappos, skyrocketed. But over time, gross profit slumped and the engagement slumped again. It became too complicated. There wasn't enough role clarity. And so, it is a delicate balance. Something might work for a while, and then it might be overdone, overbaked. And so then they move back to towards a more hierarchical structure, but they kept some of the elements of people at the front line being empowered. So, I think with those large...
I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. You finish first.
I think that, it's an ongoing process to find ways to get people to be, collaborative in the workforce. And something might work for a while, but then there's shift, and that shift may be because of the human side, or it may be because you're asking them to do completely different tasks.
So we go back to that point you just mentioned before, triggered something in my mind. That's really interesting, and maybe we can finish the conversation today on that note, because it's an interesting fact that puts things in context, and you can sort of every now and then relate certain behaviors and certain rules that you take for granted maybe to that sort of fundamental fact. So I'm talking about, organizational psychology, or even psychology itself. So a human being, because I was speaking before incidentally about the ape society, and talking about that army of 3-4 apes going around that territory as the lookout to see if there's anybody going to be attacking us, kind of thing. So, so are we really hierarchical? Is this the only way to do it? Is that your belief, or the human resources science, or the psychology science? There's a lot of psychologists. But what's that particular branch of psychology, evolutionary psychology? They do talk about, a lot of them say, we are hierarchical. We cannot build a society where that's a company, town, or family, or whatever, where that's that kind of hierarchy. Is that a known thing? What's the understanding of human, at least from the human resources point of view?
I would say, in Industry 4.0 and 4.0 and 5.0, It's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
We're looking for agile organizations. We're looking for organizations that are more decentralized, or parts of the organization that are decentralized. So if you think to innovative companies like, say, Canva, they have quite a decentralized design where, teams are empowered at the front line. There aren't major levels of hierarchies involved.
But what does it mean? Canva is a product company.
Mhm.
The product they design, it's a SaaS product. It
Mhm.
will be used ultimately by everybody.
Mhm.
So no one just by themselves can make a decision about a product. It has to come down to consensus, which is what we do,
Mhm.
and make sure all the teams that talk to all our clients, we build consensus about what that feature needs to be.
Mm.
So how can you not have hierarchy when you've got all these people on the front line bringing intelligence? Someone has to share the conversation and distill it, bring and create that consensus and make that
Yes.
decision in a
Yes.
way has to be made. A decision about a product,
So I'm
about
not
a
saying
timeline.
no hierarchy. I'm saying that, in the case of Canva and others where there is flexibility, that they work more on a team-based structure where teams are empowered to work on a problem. There isn't highly scripted work.
It's fine. That's great. Yeah. No.
Yeah. And so, as, the challenge is, as small companies, whether they be product or service companies, as companies grow, there is a known drift to rigidity. So you start off by, the sole proprietor. In fact, the engineering company that I worked with for a long period of time, started off as a sole operator. Someone selling engineering parts out of the back of a car boot. It became a family business, employed the son. They expanded. They bought the competition. To where they bought out lots of other companies, and then they had to consolidate. And they brought us in as researchers because they didn't want that, consolidation and the need for more hierarchy because they were so large. They're a mid-size organization with reaching 2,000 employees. You needed some hierarchy, but how can you still have flexibility in there? And so the example I shared before is, they still had the branches, they still had state managers, then above the state managers, they had product, lines, etc. Right. And that's all below the C-suite. So that, there's about 3 levels of, hierarchy there. To inject more flexibility, they had that support hub on the side, so that there are people to ensure that the innovation is not lost between the different branches and the different levels of hierarchy.
Yeah, I think, it's so interesting. I mean, took the example of Canva. I mean, I'm not sure, I trust, yourself, you've done enough research about the company because, I mean, a lot of it can be marketing stunts because I don't know about Canva. Is it a public company now or is it private? I'm not sure who owns it. Is it?
Oh, sorry, it's not one that I've
That's okay.
researched in detail, but
really
I
doesn't
know
matter
that
too
it
much.
is one that's spruiked
Sure,
to
sure.
be a bit
Sure.
more
I mean, look at Google.
flexibility.
Look at Google. Someone was protesting the other day. They were thrown out of the company and they even lost their job. I mean, they talk about people being free and whatever. It's all mostly marketing stunts. They use it to attract employees and create a brand, affinity and stuff like that. The bottom line is they have one product. They have one stock listed somewhere on some stock exchange. Everybody has to feed into that. Their livelihood is based on that and based on that brand. Now so really I think the balance is the word that you said at the very beginning that is really important for me, that I don't know how well we are doing or not doing, but this whole space. I think to give people space and connect it with your number one point, the whole learning thing, to give them the space to learn and give them the space to bring it back into practice, because that is an investment and a risk you've got to be willing to take. That is a real deal. All the other marketing stunts, I believe that a lot of companies employ, and I look at it and I can just cut through it very quickly. Being a CEO of a tech company, I can see it's just not possible. It's all rubbish. But that, what you said, Catherine, I'm going to really lose sleep over it in a positive way, trying to process what we are doing or not doing there. I think.
And if you don't mind if I just jump in
Oh,
there.
absolutely.
So, creating that space, that's creating agility. that's creating empowerment. That's creating this more flexibility within the system
Oh,
to
yeah,
fail.
I'm related
so
to your point. Yeah, absolutely.
So you only need to do it like in small steps. It's not about like getting rid of 3 layers of management.
Yeah, no,
that's not going to work in
okay.
a mid-size or even
right,
a small organization. But really what I love about how
Sure.
you've picked that up
Sure.
is that this whole idea about, how flexible do we need to be? How rigid do we need to be? At that organizational level, at the end of the day, it's what do you do as an individual and a leader to embed that in the weekly practice?
Absolutely. And, to explain why I was disagreed with you before about the Canva stuff is that whole, the independence kind of stuff. I mean, really what it means is I think all that is, I would probably not worry about that statement. I would worry about what you said at the very beginning. Clearly, that means you value it the most in this conversation. You brought it up to be number one, is that space. I think that's really what it should be instead of the independence, because it means that. But at the same time, we need a bit of a hierarchy because at the end of the day, it's one product. We need to build one culture, one product, one image. We're not even if you look at, so interesting, you look at models like KPMG and some of those consulting firms, oh my God, spend 3 years trying to understand their business model and they will confuse you and you'll never understand it. It's beyond the joke. But anyway, if I was to simplify it without being sued, some kind of franchise model, So they've got the brand to be able to have all the lobbying power. KPMG is inserted in every country in the world. Every president spends money in every country in the world. Probably at least 150 of them spend money with KPMG. So they've got lobbyists, they've got marketing to the tunes of billions of dollars worth of influence, right? And then when it comes to what they're doing, that top tier, if you like, creating that influence power to generate business. So, but when it comes to execution, almost like franchise. So you've got this kind of manager that runs maybe 3, 4, 5, 20, 30 people team. It's like they've got the independence in terms of it's like a franchise. You're running your own business and profitability, and you KPMG making money from you as you make money because they're generating that business for you, giving you that influence and the brand power and the connections and all that, right? So that is, as you were explaining before, I'm going that kind of, but even then, man, you've got to toe the party's line. You cannot, tarnish the KPMG brand. My God, you're gone. Your contract is 6,000 pages in terms of how you maintain your KPMG brand and all that. So interesting. As you're saying that, I'm processing in my head all the different models out there. Interesting. But I absolutely value that point because I would love to bring you back at some point and maybe make the whole conversation about that and use some kind of practicality and make it, but also I would love to bring you back and maybe talk about, designing teams. We just talk about that.
Yeah,
what other
we've
things
only touched on it.
I know. So
because I've really just focused on the collaboration piece, right?
Yes.
How do we get people interacting? But there's a whole gamut of ways to get teams up and running quickly.
All right. On this note, I'm immensely grateful. You've triggered 3 things in my mind that I'm gonna really lose sleep over in a positive way, meaning really analyze. And this whole thing about the space, but also not just the space to research and learn, the space to allow you to practice it, to bring it in. Because that is when, actually, this is the real test, what kind of company you are. Maybe it's one step and maybe it's not that bad to say, oh, yeah, take 2 hours a day out of your week to learn. Oh, that's fine. We can live with that. But to bring some of these ideas in, that's the real test, what kind of company you are. So I really respect you for highlighting that to me. And I hope that was clear to everybody else because that in itself is priceless. And I really appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you for the conversation. I've enjoyed it and enjoyed learning more about your business.
Thank you very much. We'll definitely bring you back, Catherine. It's such a big topic. We tried within an hour and a half to give it a decent justice, but we'll bring you back. And I really feel you've ignited some ideas in my head. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.